You are watching the Fayetteville Government Channel. Up next, full coverage of the latest City of Fayetteville ward meeting. Ward meetings are held at various times by City Council members to interact with and receive feedback from the residents of their ward.
Well, Rhonda went upstairs to grab our maps, but she wanted us if we could go ahead and get started with a round of introductions. Normally we just go around the room and introduce ourselves. My name's Alan Long. I'm the Ward 4 Position 2 representative to the City Council, and if we want to kind of go this way and just work our way around the room, and hopefully by that time Rhonda will be back down with our map.
I'm Ryan Miller, live over in Salem Meadows, and I'm the Ward 4 representative for Town and Gal.
I'm Chris Bell, and I'm here representing the Botanical Garden. I'm Martha McBride.
I'm Brett Park. I live at the west end of Maple Street.
I'm Deborah Boddington. I live in Ward 4.
Robert Elberson. I live on the far north end of Hartman Avenue, Hartman and Schroeder.
My name's Lawrence Hare. I live on Rupel Row.
I'm Mark Kenyon. I am actually in Ward 2, but I'm the City Council representative to the town and county.
I'm Ethel Simpson. I live in Ward 4, just west of the university.
I'm Bill Muller, and I live in the morning shadow of the station.
The big shadow.
Big shadow.
And I'm Rhonda Adams, Ward 4 Position 1 representative. So glad you're all here tonight.
That's everybody, so.
Do you want everybody to come up?
Yeah.
All right, would y'all do that? Everybody come up and join us at the table? We'd like it. I was going to invite you to do that. I don't have enough chairs, but
Now that the fan has been turned off, yes.
we'll just get close. Yes.
Okay, where's the display going to be?
Ryan, can we? Here are the maps that Dee Dee made. While we're getting set up there, do any of you, glad you're here. Thank you. Sure, I'd be happy to. Does anyone need the Fayetteville Recycle E? Maybe you do? There you go. Pass that down to Bill. I've got several. I get to see.
You got several, and you got them left when we finish up. I can get another one. I got several.
Let's pass it around. You'll get one.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Yeah, I just had a few left, and so I wanted to make sure.
Those are worth $5.
And while they're getting set up too, y'all come on up here. There's more chairs. Somebody can sit here by me. Alan may have some announcements too, but while they're getting set up, we won't waste any minutes. I'm excited that tomorrow night on the agenda session, we're going to be seeing the Fayetteville, the agreement of understanding for the Safe Routes to School grant that we talked about here. Alan and I both signed off on that, and it was a proposal for a grant for the Arkansas Highway Transportation Department to do the construction of a trail bridge over Clapper Creek at Salem Road, and it's happening if the council votes on it, which I
strongly think we will.
So that's just an exciting announcement to follow up on something that we discussed here about 4 months ago, maybe April, something like that. So that'll be on tomorrow night.
And I have to say that staff did an excellent job putting that proposal together.
Absolutely. Alan and I both wrote letters of support to the Highway Transportation Department, and I don't think Fayetteville's ever gotten one of those grants before, right?
First ever, and we got the largest grant in the state of Arkansas.
So it's really, really exciting for getting our kids safely around the schools in our beautiful Ward 4 west of 540. So exciting news. Okay, so we have 2 presentations tonight. You want to start with the first one?
Yeah, we have Chris Bell and Martha McBride here from the Botanical Gardens of Ozarks, and they're going to talk with us a little bit about their plans for expansion and just a little bit about what the Botanical Gardens does for us as a community.
So do we just stand from here, or how do you want to do that? Go over there or the corner? Would that be
You
better?
want to both stand right up here? So would that help you with the camera if they were both right up here in the front?
We don't have to be on camera.
Presentation central.
I'm just here from Wolf.
You're here, okay, so you can jump off if she needs
to
you.
ramble.
Or would you like to change?
No, I'd rather
Then
stay
how come the
here.
camera-
You do,
I'd
however,
rather
whenever.
stand, I probably would. I have a couple of handouts here. Just
Good.
And again, I'm here representing, Martha and I are here representing the garden, and we're both on the board. I'm the treasurer, and Martha's the vice president, and Walden asked, because I guess he normally comes, and he's also a ward member. I live, just as I was telling someone, above the ward. So I'm still in the county, but I'm above Holcomb on West Salem. So I would be in your ward if I was in the city limits.
Very close.
You're the Anne Friends part.
I'm probably the
You're
next
Anne
one to come
Friends.
in. I imagine that's going to happen here pretty soon. So I lived in Fayetteville since the early 60s. So, and Martha's lived here, I think, all her young life, right? So anyway, I wanted you all to how many of you all been to the garden? Well, glad. Have you gone more than once? Have you been recently? Go often? Okay. We're in our 6th year of actual operation, even though the garden started in the early 90s as a dream, but we're actually in the 6th year now of truly operating and taking admissions and memberships and stuff like that. So this is just some information again about the garden, and Walt may have shared some of this with you, so if I'm redundant, I apologize. I've never done a ward meeting before. So Martha and I have been involved in the garden for about 6 years. In fact, both Martha and I are terming out as board members. We serve 2 consecutive terms, and we cannot serve anymore after December. So we will have to find other things to do. We actually both volunteered to head up our greening committee. I don't know, they got us at a really sweet moment. So the greening of the gardens happens in May of every year, and it's the official kickoff for the garden. Right now, we are in the process, we have some exciting things going on, and one of them is that we're in the process of finalizing some plans to develop the garden even further than it is now. It is really basically only sitting on like 10 acres, and it's 9 demonstration gardens, but the land also goes further in between us and Culpeper Place, so we are looking to expand all of that, and we always remind ourselves that it's about the garden. It's not about the buildings, but the buildings do support the functions of the garden. So we're in the process of building an education center and the dream of building an education and a visitor center. David McKee he's our architect, and he's been finalizing some wonderful plans, and we haven't presented these yet to the city council nor to parks. So we're not going to really talk about what it looks like, other than the fact that we've had several meetings, and we've had meetings with the general public about their perception of the garden and the trails, and how so many of our parts of Fayetteville interact together. The Lake Fayetteville group, the trail riders, the off-trail riders, the Audubon Society, the water conservation, the soil conservation. There is a lot of things that go on in Fayetteville, and we all want to be good partners. So. And what we realized from a lot of these discussions is that we kind of know what we want, but we haven't really been sharing a true vision of it in actual plans. So what we have now is the plans that we would like to again present to the city council and the city and the parks about how the rest of the garden will develop, and how those gardens, there'll be another, is it 7 or 8 different gardens, that how they will be laid out, what those gardens will consist of. And again, remember, the botanical garden is about gardens and plants and stuff that grow in Arkansas, that are native to this area. So we are showing people how to grow plants in this area, have vegetable gardens, the right kind of trees, you know, what will survive and prosper in our area. So we're excited about showing these plans, and it's going to be quite an undertaking. We have a staff of like less than 10 people, if you didn't know that run that garden on a daily basis, and 4 of them are the gardeners. So if you think about how 4 people are basically putting that garden together with a ton of volunteer help. but 4 truly paid staff running that garden for the gardens itself, not including the operation part. It's kind of phenomenal. So right now, besides what we're doing with the plans and what we're going to present, and we hope to do that in early fall, we have expanded our butterfly house. Have everybody seen the butterfly house? Mm-hmm. Well, Martha and I were over there last Tuesday, and we hadn't been in a while. We walked in, and there were tons of butterflies. We were so excited because last year, in the heat and the late spring and the snow and this, our unusual weather in this area anymore, we didn't have butterflies come out for a while. But now we've got giant monarchs, and again, they're native butterflies. We don't have any exotics or any, but they're all butterflies that grow in our area. And it was just so fun to stand in there and see them all. I mean, we have so many monarchs right now that we're going to have to let them out. I mean, they're producing, and what a great problem. Because before we had like 2 or 3, and now we've got 50, 60, and they're going to have to let them out because they produce about every day. I didn't know this, but yeah.
You realize that you've got something really rare.
Oh, no.
On the Arkansas butterfly list that people post pictures every day.
Are they? Have you seen
Almost nobody in the whole state has even seen one monarch.
Oh, wow.
There's milkweed galore.
Oh, yeah, there's the milkweeds.
But,
mm-hmm.
but they didn't come.
They didn't come this year. That's
so how'd
exactly.
you get yours?
Well, you'd have to ask the people who are really in charge of the butterfly house because that is not my expertise. But I do know that they have plenty of nannies who are growing, or raising them. We now have what we call an insectatorium. That's a little barn that's next to not far from the butterfly house. And just walking around, once they started to get, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, there are just tons of eggs all over now. So it's been a good weather now for it. But yeah, talk to Judy Smith at our garden, and she'll tell you more about how we got them or why they're doing so well. So if you haven't been out, here's an expert too. It's phenomenal. It's so fun to see the giant monarchs, and then of course there were like 7 different varieties of other butterflies, and I should have brought the list of what we have, but.
I think Rita Littrell is the one that started. She has monarchs at her house, and she brought some of the eggs, and then the butterfly nannies helped cultivate them and so forth. So you could be a butterfly nanny.
Yeah.
I've been doing that past years, but nobody's shown up to lay eggs. There's no caterpillars on our milkweed.
Yeah, I haven't seen any either, and I have milkweed too. So.
I've been all the way to the East Coast in the last 2 weeks. We drove back on Pennsylvania Turnpike and all these other roads just to the north up here. We never saw a monarch. Many of those states do not mow their road right-of-ways,
so they have
so
the
they got
wildflowers.
native plants. Mm-hmm. Thousands of common milkweed all the way from Long Island Sound down here, and not a single monarch. You'd see all kinds of other species of butterflies as you're driving, and you would not see not one monarch.
Well, we need to really be advertising
this,
don't we? We need to have people coming from all states and saying, we have monarchs. So, but again, it's because it's because of the weather, and and they're just dying off. They're not another one of our things. And that kind of leads me into a segue about what the garden is really focusing on, and that is the learning and teaching our children about nature, getting them out of the house, getting them out of watching television, being on their iPhones and their iPads. We want them to experience nature. And again, this is something that they may never see, the butterflies. And also we have several different camps going on. We have an explorer camp. We have the little sprouts, and our little sprouts are just what they are, little sprouts. So Walt calls them, curtain climbers. Curtain climbers is Walt's expression for them. We started out with like 7 at our camp for the little sprouts, and we're up to 100 a week now. And it's only like 2 hours a day. And so he says you just see all these little curtain climbers all over. But they planted a pumpkin patch this year. So they're learning how to, Gerald Klingeman, we were just talking about how wonderful he is. And we don't know what we do without Gerald Klingeman. He's a university professor, retired. He's a horticulturist. I mean, the man is just everything can be done. He does it. But he said, in Arkansas, if you're going to plant, you first have to dig up rock. So he said he made them all dig a rose, dig a little pot of fetch, and then they had to get buckets of rocks to get down to the real dirt. So anyway, so it's exciting to see the educational part of the garden too, and the schools have all embraced us, and they bring things for butterfly days and earth days. We have classes for 2 to 4th grade. So that's kind of where we are. We're very much excited about the future of the garden. We want everybody to, again, appreciate what we have in our town in this area, and that to come and volunteer or work or be on our board. We've got some positions open. So do you all have any questions? Is this what you wanted to hear? I don't know what else to say, but be sure to look that over, because that kind of tells you about how many visitors we have and how we are a good economic indicator for the Fayetteville area, and for this, bring visitors in. We are on bus tours, trip tours now, and because of Crystal Bridges, we get some of that overflow. So, yeah, we appreciate you letting us come tonight. That's
one thing people might be interested in is, because we have a lot of schools in Ward 4, is how you bring schools in and how school children come there and go through the educational programs.
Well, again, this is Judy Smith's area, and Judy, our curriculum is state approved. So the teachers come and they get the curriculum from the state, and then they interact with the garden on how the curriculum works. And she's the one who's, as I said, in charge of it. And especially during April and May, we have the classes, and a great deal of the grade schools from Springdale have been there, and some of our grade schools. And they just come for the Earth Day. There's stations set around, and then the learning curriculum is applied to those different stations, and they can actually take it back, and it's part of their school. So again, it brings them out to the garden, but it's also part of a teaching technique. Did I answer that? Because Judy, again, is the one who knows it more than me.
I just thought it was really important for people to hear that, because it's such a wonderful resource
And
for our schools to be able to use to send school children there to get them.
And that is the Earth Day. That kind of explains it a little on Earth Day here, and it also explains it on the butterfly days on the last one. So those are the two that are during the school year, and then the camps and the Little Sprouts. Little Sprouts goes on in the spring, because it's for below. They aren't going to school yet. So, but the Explorer Camp is a day camp, so that's for older kids. But that's what we try to do, is we try to get them out to teach them as much as possible about our wonderful resource in our world and our earth and our plants and all that. So.
What are the hours of the gardens now?
They're open from 9 to 5 and 7 days a week. And we have special events, and we have free concerts, like we just had Red, White, and Blue, and that was free to the public. Our next one is in August, and I think it's a bluegrass. Yeah. And it's also free. So be sure and take advantage of coming. Those are great days, great things for the kids. And we just had Firefly Fling, which if anybody been to Firefly Fling? Okay. My chiropractor said he wished he had children, because he would have been, when he came, because 2,400, that is our #1 event. And it's the kids all come out and dress up as fairies, and there's all kinds of interactions for the kids, and then the parents come and they dress up, and everybody just says, I was out of town, but Martha and I have worn wings before, and we participated. So.
I think last year there must have been several thousand people.
Oh, they're everywhere. That is the biggest. It is amazing, and the weather's been beautiful for the last couple of ones we've had. So, and that's another thing. You don't have to be a child. You can pretend.
Do you have to dress up?
No.
Okay.
I didn't dress up.
But it's fun when Martha and I had the big butterfly wings. They were about this big. And we were sitting taking stuff, and we kept hitting each other, and we were laughing. And said, it's really difficult to be a butterfly.
One thing that I think it's important too that people know is, since the city and the botanical gardens have been such good partners, that there are free hours too.
Oh yeah, Saturday morning is free to Fayetteville residents, and so that's from like 9 to 12, and that is every Saturday it's free. And that is part of our thing. And we do lease the land from the city. I mean, it's a long-term lease. but we get no basic financial support, no tax. Some people think your tax money goes to support the garden. The garden is truly, totally supported by membership, gate receipts, donations, memorials. That is where our, and we, you know, we are good partners because we share our bathroom for the trail riders and the parking lot for the trail riders, and so we try to be good partners, but we also need help in keeping the garden going, so.
Okay.
Well, thanks again for letting us.
Thank you. Walt, we missed him.
Okay,
No,
I'll
you
tell
did
Walt
a great job.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Well,
Mark,
you
I'll
are
kind of
both
sneak out
welcome to
and let
stay
you
or
go.
sneak out either
Well,
way,
if
okay?
I become a member, go into the city limits, I'll come.
Remember, we're Ward 4 and friends, so
Okay.
you're always
Okay, so I can
invited.
come because I'm like only about a half a mile from the bridge.
You're a friend.
All right, so I'm a friend. Okay, I'll come again. All right, thanks again.
Thank you. So we've got about, what, 45 minutes here to spend about 20 or 25 minutes on our Town and Gown Subcommittee A issues. That's the next thing on our agenda, and then we'll reserve the last 10 or 15 minutes of our meeting for neighborhood issues and council issues and things that we want to talk about that are specific to Ward 4 perhaps. But let's move on to the next item. You ready?
Sure. Okay, this is Ryan Miller.
I guess I need to stand up too. I'm Ryan Miller. I'm Ward 4 representative for the Town and Gown. I live over in Salem Meadows area. I'm pretty sure I was telling the ladies from Botanical Garden, my letters got stolen from the Holcomb kids. So I think that's where our subdivision is. I want to take a step back before we dive into the map. I print these off, and I'm guessing it's all right for me to pass these out. They were just passed out to the committee members, but I went ahead and print them off. So I went ahead and let everybody see this. If you don't know, I'm sure everybody does know, Town and Gown was put together over the last few years and really solidified over this last year to be a communication between the city and the university, kind of mutually pursue common goals. Over the last, I would say, 6 months or so, it's really been figuring out what exactly that means, and now we're actually starting to get some traction and get some stuff accomplished. And so these are actually, last fall, we submitted a lot of different ideas. I know that we got some comment cards from a Ward 4 meeting, and several of these I actually talked to Deborah about to get some feedback on. And we made a giant list of issues that are facing the city of Fayetteville, university, things like that. And then the committee themselves, 19 of the 21 members, fill out a survey to rank those issues. So this is all the issues ranked. And then we separate those out because the committee's rather large, and this is a lot of issues. And so we kind of grouped them into subcategories, and the subgroups are meeting to address the issues. I volunteered to be on Group C, mainly because the issues that I heard from you guys were mainly the ones that are listed in Group C, having to deal largely with communication, a lot with unrelated people in the same residence, off-campus students, tenant relationships, noise ordinance, things like that. So that's the subcommittee I'm on. This last time we met, and Mark, feel free to jump in any time and correct me if I say something wrong, but Group B came forward with some suggestions, and we're not I think the thing that we've been figuring out is we're not a decision-making body. And again, this is where I need to make sure I say it right. We're not a decision-making body, but we can give suggestions and recommendations up to City Council. So Committee B came with some suggestions, and I believe they're going to come forward before City Council eventually. And I hope that my committee can have some suggestions coming forward. Right now, the city does a really good job of putting up boosts and communication about the issues that are listed there. But I've been talking with my committee members of really trying to tap into social media, electronic communication, especially that the university has with students, and really trying to build that partnership so that communication can be sent out, especially with students nowadays. You might not get them all to go by a booth, but they all will follow Twitter, they all follow Facebook, they all get university emails. So really trying to get some of these emails out. Maybe just a basic email of here's like the top 3 things that you need to know when you become a resident of Fayetteville, and just try to get that information out. That's my pipe dream or bubble that I have that I'm hoping that our committee agrees with, and I think they will, so that we can kind of get some of that communication and information out. I think, for example, I didn't know that there was a 3-person per house, that whole rule, until I got on this committee. So I don't think a lot of students know that. One of my, it's basically a family friend who's practically my sister. She didn't know that when she asked me. She was like, we're looking for a house where 4 girls can live together. I was like, don't ask me that, and I explained, and she's very much by the rules. So as soon as I told her that, she was like, oh no, we don't want to break the rules. And so I think most students, if they knew about it, at least, and not most students, maybe that's an overstep, but a lot of students, if they knew that, would take a step back. So that's these issues. If you have questions on that, we can address that. You might notice that not all the issues, I think it cut off at 11, where we decided that this was a huge list and we couldn't address everything in the first year. So I think it cuts off at 11 or 12, where those are things that are going to be additional over the future years. And I believe this coming up, we're going to kind of reevaluate and see if there's anything that needs to go up or down the list. But I think the main thing, if there's no questions on this, I'm going to jump into...
I have a question.
Okay.
I think it's very touching that you talk about how the students want to observe the rules, but in University Heights, where some of us live, we're concerned about whether the landlords know the rules and whether the landlords are willing to obey the rules and whether the city is willing to enforce the rules.
I think
we talked about that on Friday, didn't we?
Yes, landlords is definitely something that I, as a former student and somebody who knows students, I think landlords is probably a bigger issue than just students. And so it's especially when the economy that we just faced and with the area that we live in Northwest Arkansas, I think you see a lot of people that might have been living in Fayetteville. People love to live in Fayetteville. If you haven't been around 540, around 530, people love to live in Fayetteville and commute north. And I think if people get transferred, a lot of times they just rent out their house and they don't really think about enforcing the rules. And so I think we've been trying to figure out how to. We've looked at. I can't remember who on the committee did some research on college towns and which ones have. There's this idea of a landlord registry or rental registry, and I think that's in the beginning stages because that's a lot of infrastructure that you have to build in. Who's going to do that? I think both sides, university, city, you're like, this is a great idea, and they're both like, now you pay for it, and you get it figured out. So right now I'm trying to hopefully get some baby steps towards that, at least educating students. And I know the landlord issue has been brought up at every meeting, and trying to figure out how you actually enforce that, but then trying to, again, just educate landlords. I think a lot of landlords probably just think if they, you get one person to sign the lease, one person to fill out the water, as long as they just take care of it. But then trying to figure out how do you deal with that absentee. So any suggestions that are had that you think of, I'm more than happy to take those and try to figure out what to do with that. Yes.
What would be wrong with having renting property as a business? If a person has multiple rental properties, then they should be registered with the city as a business. There would provide your base for information about property ownership.
I forgot my pen, so I promise I'm not going to text. I'm actually okay. I'm going to type it in as I type.
As long as you promise.
Yes. I'll be honest. I have no clue when it comes to business permits, but I can definitely write that down.
Well, what I was thinking more, not actually issuing permits, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe a very low cost permit. But there should be a registry of multiple property owners that are renting property for, if nothing else, security reasons.
And I will say also this, I think you've been to one of the meetings, I'm not sure if anybody else has been to any of the meetings yet. I missed one, I apologize, but it was the one that went for 10 minutes and then we canceled it because of the tornadoes. So I didn't feel as bad about, I was running late and they were like, we're canceled. I'm like, okay, I guess I technically missed one meeting. But I've seen, and this is just my own personal opinion, I've seen a lot more growth together. So I think there's a lot of promise for this committee over time. So I think that's something that I'll write down and try to figure out. I kind of joked, I talked to Rhonda, I kind of joked the first couple of meetings, I felt like everybody was voting party lines. Like, the town would vote one way and the university would vote one way. But I think there's been a lot more discussion now that people are realizing that even if you work for the university, you still live in Fayetteville. You're still a resident, and you still don't want 42 students to live in the house next to you. And so I think that's beginning to open up the conversations. And I think the university as well realizes that if a student enjoys their time in Fayetteville, they're going to enjoy their time at the university. It's going to be better for both parties. But I'll write that down and try to figure out what the options for that are.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't mind speaking, I think it's already required as a business to be registered in the city.
So figuring out like what actually the definition of a business would be if you have rents to people.
There's a business across the street from me called hogparking.com, and it's right in the smack middle of a residential neighborhood, and I would say that at least 100 cars are parked there every football game. There is a beautiful website that explains the reservation process. These parking spaces go into the 4 figures depending on whether you go for 3 games or whether you want the deck or the upper deck or the lower deck or the one with the big TV or whatever. And for most of this summer, there has been an expansion which is permitted as enlargement of the kitchen and the garage, for which at least 5 loads of cement have been poured. And I am just at a loss to understand how that can be, how it can be a wide open, internationally advertised business and sit there in University Heights.
That might be something I even to talk to you guys about to see what issues that's even a bigger issue than the committee.
Long-running issue.
And see, does anybody go to inspect to see that the permit and the construction actually match? I can't believe that all that cement has anything to do with enlarging a kitchen, for instance.
Didn't that go back?
Jeremy. Just to code enforcement and to, I don't know planning's schedule for going in after, we know they got permits and got their plan approved and all that, so there was an effort to get the stages done right. But yeah, when it comes to running a business in a neighborhood, I don't know the details either. I voted on the business permits, I remember that, and I remember studying it at the time, but right now I don't have the recall on what all is involved with what all is permitted under a business, especially in a neighborhood. So
I think this also brings up a good issue that we've discussed in the committee, that a lot of these issues are not just like student versus neighbors.
No.
That this is, again, as a former student, I can pretty much guarantee that the students can't afford those parking spots.
Oh no, people come from all over.
Yeah, trying to figure out how to, again, some of these issues, I think it's unearthing a lot of things, and it's not, the students are always the big bad wolf, and trying to figure out how to address some of those other issues beyond just making sure they pull their trash can back. So.
Are you guys working with the neighborhood associations at all? I sort of see what you guys are working on is very similar to what we do. I'm on the Rupel Road POA, and almost all of our residents are students. And we're doing the same things. We're creating forms to send out to them to remind them of the rules. Is there a way that we could get this easier, more easily? And
I'm always open. I talked to Rhonda again, trying to figure out what, my neighborhood doesn't have a POA, and so I was like, how do we do that? Just because we have a great park that I would love to be expanded and utilized. And I think the first step, in my opinion, is to get our neighbors organized. I know several neighbors now, and it's like, okay, how can we do stuff together? And so I think that's, I was asking, how does that work? So any information that I can get and try to get out there.
Well, it seems that there's ways that we could sort of help each other, that we could draw, if you guys had sort of common guidelines for ways to kind of boil the information down for students easily and quickly, we could use that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have access to all of the landlord information because we build them for the grads. And so we have that if you guys have problems with landlords and, So.
I do know right now that the city already has a lot of different things, all the way from like coloring books for students, or not students, but like kids. All there you go. You'd be surprised. Grad students. But they do. I know they have like a double-page flyer that has a ton of information on it. That might be save you some time and effort just to get that from them. One thing that it's kind of not exactly with students, but we've been working on with my people that I know in my neighborhood is developing some kind of like, welcome to the neighborhood, glad you're here type of thing. So that can be, again, once August rolls around, or maybe mid-July when that influx happens.
Yeah,
is being able to, I think the city already has those, and I don't think our taxes pay for it. So you can get that, and just already, that'd be one less thing for you guys to have to make, is you can just take that to them already.
Because I know that the city now, it's been the first year, and Dee Dee, you probably know a little bit or a lot more about this than I do, but the city now goes to the orientation sessions for new freshman classes to orientate them about our laws here in Fayetteville and what we expect.
It's actually, I just go to the incoming freshmen, and it's if they choose to come to that session. The community resources division, they go to orientation, and they're going to Razor Fest, and they're the ones that interact a lot with the students. They're the ones that put the placards on the door in the yards that say, hey, you forgot to, mow your lawn for 6 months, that kind of stuff. And they end up working a lot with landlords and so forth. There was the Fayetteville Council of Neighborhoods. Participation had dropped off significantly when it was first put together several years ago. I am working on that, but it's difficult. There's at least 54 neighborhood associations, so I have to update all that information. So I'm working on that. But definitely call me. I get tons of phone calls, hey, can you help me with this or that or anything. I do know that the enforcement is very difficult of more than 3 unrelated people living in a house. But my intern, who was fabulous last year, had 6 people living in her residence. So.
Yeah, and that's also one thing we discussed is ways to make sure students know, but also it's not necessarily even. There's sometimes that I have some friends that won't out them, but they've got 4. Again, I think it might be a gender issue. They have 4 girls living together, and you would never know. But just making sure that you're a good neighbor. That's what I always tell people. It's like, as long as you're a good neighbor, then your neighbors will like you.
I'll mention that because it is such an issue. On accessfayetteville.org, on the front, when you first sign on to that, there's a customer service request, and one of the service requests is looking into too many people at a resident, and it is anything more than 3 unrelated individuals. It is
single-family home.
And a single-family residence, yes, a single-family home. And it is complaint-driven because we don't have the staff to police the whole city to see what's going on. So it's not police, it is complaint-driven. And you can follow the complaint after you file it. So it's really kind of important for people to be proactive to file a complaint. And it is very hard to identify who's really living there, but they do work very seriously on it. Code compliance does that. I live right behind the Pi-Fi house in Wilson Park, so of course we have that. And there are some people that are really good neighbors that you want to be in your neighborhood. So it's not like we're out policing it, let me put it that way, but it is a mechanism. The parking is really the best way to get compliance, because if they have more cars, they can only have 4 cars parked in front of their home. You cannot park cars in your yard. It has to be an identified parking area that's either through landscaping or concrete, identifies it as parking. So a lot of times it's easier to enforce the parking than it is the trying to figure out how many people live there. And it's my understanding that the landowner is always contacted when there is a complaint of over-occupancy.
You mentioned a good word there that I'm hoping to address with my subcommittee is proactive. I feel like right now a lot of times it's more reactive. Like we see a problem, we're going to fix it. We're trying to be more proactive from the front end. The university is about to start for the first time of freshmen. Like all freshmen have to take this course. And so really working with them to maybe have like a Fayetteville 101. And then just again getting the information out from, it's in my opinion if we could get some information out mid-semester, every semester, that's about when students start looking for, even, I mean they start looking for stuff the next year mid-fall. So if we can start getting information out then that we can hopefully address some of those issues.
Yeah, I'm teaching one of those in the fall, one of those perspectives. I haven't heard, they didn't say anything to us about Fayetteville coming in.
Yeah, I know they've already kind of locked it down on what is this year. You had to.
Oh, so we can't do it this year?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there was some kind of application process or discussing. It was very limited who can talk to freshmen and kind of make sure
But
that.
your action could be that you email the provost, since it's her course,
Yeah.
and say, I'd like to add a Fayetteville 101 component to that, because I added it to my class when I taught it for 10 years when it wasn't required, but we could do what we wanted. But I was teaching now, it's a formed syllabus. But I think that's an action.
Well,
that's the being
still get a
proactive.
space. If we had the stuff, we would still we could still work it in. That wouldn't be.
But I think these are issues that seriously kind of go on. We could have a whole meeting on this, but I think it's really important to think about the purpose of forming a town and gown committee and what the map, I mean, when you start with defining the area in which we want to focus on, right, in which we want to identify as this is the area that we're going to start putting some teeth and plan, not binding necessarily, but some plan into this area when it comes to safety and code compliance and lights and all those things that you're going to punch out to us that are on your considerations list.
And real quick, Mr. Albertson, I think you've had your hand up for a little while. I just wanted to let you know if you had a question.
Not a question. I thought this might be an appropriate time.
Say he was. And what I see there is a Ward 1, a Ward 2, and 2 Ward 3.
There's a typo. I promise I'm Ward 4. I promise I have.
Ryan is Ward 4.
I thought you said Ward 4.
Yes.
And the city council put the word representatives on, so Ryan went through a vetting process like other members of, there were some other Ward 4 people interested. Each ward had, Mark and I sit on that committee, several applicants, and we had a good pool to choose from. We put one. That was the makeup of the town and gown committee was created first and voted on by the council, approved by the council, and then after that, the university put its people up, the city put its people up, and then the City of Fayetteville, represented by the elected officials, selected representatives from each ward. And so Ryan is Ward 4's representative, and then the other 3 were selected by the council too.
And I drew a 2-year term, we did that the first meeting, so either you get to have me for another year or you're stuck with me for another year, depending on how you so.
Good. Sorry, Mr. Evans.
Well, I just thought maybe we could bring this to, like I said, a closure with I can relate my experiences as living in University Heights as reactive, and I would like to suggest a proactive action. My reaction has been to identify, I can't remember if it was 7 or 11 houses just on Garvin, Hartman, and Palmer, between Center and Hotz, that are over-occupied. And I shared those with you at the last meeting, and I have been reactive, and I get up early in the morning and I walk around and I take pictures of the multiple cars parked at some of these perpetrators. There was one fellow on Hartman that has a fleet of vehicles that he has 7. One of them belongs to a renter, maybe 2 of them belong to renters. But he's got 7 cars. He used to have a party barge, and he's got a motorcycle out there now. But right next to me, and he's a very aggressive individual. But right next to me, there are 4 young men, and 2 of their girlfriends stay there, and there's, generally speaking, 7 cars. And they've turned their backyard into a parking lot. Again, my concern is property values more than anything else. And it degrades the value of my home. It degrades the value of everybody's home that's within sight of this house or the house down the street. I work for some older people that live across from this young fellow that has a large, too many cars. And they're intimidated by him. He's a real alpha. He used to be a cheerleader for the university, and he continues to run his mouth whenever I speak to him, and you know, there's threatening going on. And as I went to the Town and Gown meeting, as you all suggested, I'm trying to press all the buttons that I can. And as I said at the Town and Gown meeting, it's a shame because there are laws. I mean, I think I have a contract with the city. I pay thousands of dollars in property taxes, and I expect some kind of protection of my property for all that money. And I appreciate the protection that I do get, and I appreciate what has been done. What I'm trying to do is press a lot of buttons, and this man here mentioned a button that I haven't pressed yet, and that is that Access Fayetteville site that I will go to tonight.
Well, and after you met with us, I gave that list to the chief of staff, who did enter all those addresses.
And I want to thank you for that. I'm aware of that, and I got my pictures back. But you know, I'm roaming the streets at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, catching these people before they leave. Unfortunately, Chad Ball, who's in charge of ordinance support or enforcement, they don't get out there until these people have gone to work, and so they only see 2 or 3 of the cars. And they quit because their hearts at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, so they're not involved in the parties. They're not involved in the traffic, and they're not involved in the name calling, which, as I mentioned at the Town and Gown meeting, whatever they call me, it always starts with the adjective old. And that's about the only one that I can repeat at this time. Again, that's been my experience, and the pro-action that I thought is I do want to get hold of whoever is the leader of the University Heights Residents Association and ask that person for their thoughts about getting out a flyer. But I'm going to do it anyway. But getting out a flyer that simply has those 2 ordinances that I'm familiar with that will protect, and that is the one about the number of cars and the number of occupants that aren't related to one another. And bless their hearts, there was 5 sorority girls living on the corner of Palmer and Sawyer who believed, or pretended to believe, that being sorority sisters, they were all family members. And that may be the status of our students today. But I have a more pessimistic view. I think that a lot of them are just simply trying to get away with it. And on the other hand, I think a lot of the landlords simply got caught by the bubble class. You know, when the bubble popped, they got caught with properties that they couldn't afford and they couldn't sell. And so they remodeled them. There's one being remodeled now on Garvin. They're remodeling them into 4 or 5 bedroom houses with the intention of renting to them. And I tried to explain to the people that I've talked to that are over-occupying, I said, I'm not fussed at you. It's your landlord that didn't tell you, that's renting to you, that's at the bottom of this. And the fellow who owns the house next to me knows, very well knows. And the one on the corner of Palmer and Sawyer knows, because I personally discussed it with them. They don't care. The fellow on the corner of Palmer and Garvin anticipated that it takes the process, as it has been explained to me by the people in the government in the city, is a legal process that takes time. And the fellow that owned the property on the corner of Palmer said, he said, well, by the time this all gets worked out, the semester will be over, and they'll be gone. So, do what you want to do.
Thank you for your input. We'll get you hooked up with the email address or the contact of the University Heights president. We can do that for you.
I think this is a good
Ryan,
transition to the
yeah,
map.
it's a good transition.
If you've looked at any newspaper or anything like that, and this is the map that we were, a couple months ago, Committee A, which I'm not on, but they came with this idea and they started describing it. I had my iPad out trying to follow. It's not my iPad, actually, it's my work iPad, but I have to call it my iPad. But I was trying to follow, and finally we were like, you need to bring a visual so that we can discuss it and take it to people and get some feedback. So I really want to get your feedback, especially since once I describe it, you'll see that our ward has the biggest area in question as an alternative. So I'm going to look up here and talk about this, but hopefully I can see one of the little ones. Just to describe some colors, basically the considerations, these are all the issues that they discussed, and if whatever is decided, and from what I understand, this isn't a binding, like these things aren't set in stone, it's not going to be a university overlay, but this is kind of the foundation for maybe building off of that. And so all of these issues would basically, if rules were made or suggested, that they would apply to this whole area. So if there was a crosswalk rule, it would apply to this whole area. The pinkish area is areas that the university owns, and the dotted reddish area is what they consider to be their planning expansion area. So you can see some of the spots that are farther out aren't necessarily in that university planning area. And you can see roads. I'm not going to go into detail with that. The main thing you want to look at, the dark green line, is what was proposed currently as the boundary for our committee to work with, but also when people are discussing the university area, that's what's currently being proposed as what is being considered. And then there's two dotted areas that are potential expansions. I have some other concerns that I'll throw out, but I don't want to jade everybody's opinion before we start talking. So I wanted to get feedback from Ward 4 specifically on people that live in University Heights with the green area that's drawn, what you think about that, as well as the dotted expansion that's being alternative. I really want to get your feedback on whether or not you think that should be included or not. So I can go back to the committee and say Ward 4 representatives want or do not want or do not think that should be considered.
And Ryan, when we're looking at this, the Town and Gown Committee is looking at Fayetteville as a whole. But we did a survey on what considerations are most urgent. You'll see that. And then the committee took the top 10, and these are planning considerations. Okay? So this is going to look at code and planning. And you'll see that like sidewalk widths, speed limits, traffic calming, trail connectivity, transit stops. So when you're looking at this, if we pass code regulations that would go to City Council for discussion, then these are the top 10 considerations that would have to be included as someone is planning expansion in this area. But the Town and Gown Committee as a whole looks at the city as a whole.
So on that note, let's just say this, one-way streets. I ask, what does that mean on this?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you're looking at Maple Street and you've got all those streets that are feeding north and south to Maple. Okay, so they're coming from the north and they're coming towards Maple, they're coming to town that way. Right now, there are several one-way streets, but some of them are headed north and some of them are headed south. So this, in our city, we're not trying to create more one-way streets. That's not our mayor's plan or goal, and we get requests sometimes from people saying, please make that a one-way street. Same thing with lighting sidewalks. People say, please come light my sidewalk. Well, we aren't lighting sidewalks in our city. But in this area, once a map is drawn and boundaries are drawn, then we might look at this area differently and say, well, we're not creating more one-way streets, but maybe it would be better if all the streets heading to Maple were coming from the north. And I mean, we're heading to the north, and no incoming traffic was coming to this part of town from the north. They had to go around, and they could only exit campus that way. So some things like that, does that make sense? Where we're looking at, so the reason for the map, I think this is what I was, do y'all understand the reason for the map?
I understand what you say, but I think
That might have been a bad
I kind of like
example.
the idea that one street goes one way, and
Yeah.
so you don't have to drive around forever.
Right, but so that could have been a bad example, but that's one of the things that has been suggested, that people leave campus but don't come in on those streets because of the confusion on Maple in particular. And same thing with lighted lights. We don't put lights on sidewalks all over town, but we might think of pedestrian traffic in a different way inside the boundaries of this map than we normally do in the entire city of Fayetteville. Does that help to explain why we're drawing a map?
I was at the committee meeting that made the Town and Gown committee when that was presented, and the question I raised was those planning tools that you're considering, and I live on Gray Avenue, which is one of the boundaries there, how it would interact with what the neighborhood already has in place for its planning tools for things like the width of sidewalks, and taking into consideration one step further, taking the traffic direction flow from the residents' point of view rather than just from the community in that area. Because, for example, Maple, that is the street that goes across town from our neighborhood. The street that goes all the way across from the boundary, because it all obviously gets in at the top. So if you do a lot of one-waying around that from the university point of view, you've left a large section of residents creating a lot of smog and costing a lot of gas and creating a lot of time hassle if it's on a day-to-day basis. When it's from the point of view of when there's a large influx of traffic, when it's game day, that's something entirely different. But we're talking about a day-to-day effect here, movement of traffic from the resident's point of view in those chunks of areas. And I think until you do that, that you're not going to get the kind of support that the Town and Gown Committee, I think, is looking for. Special events is more what special events as well as the day-to-day neighbor issues, but as far as traffic flow from what exits daily from the university, that's not as much a concern on some of these boundary streets. But if you're going to require 4 feet sidewalks on Gray Avenue, you will take half the street. Cardwell Lane, you'll take over 2/3 of it. So those are considerations if you drive in that neighborhood. People are beautifying their easements. I've seen on my corner alone, hundreds of dollars spent in the last month on their easements to beautify those. So if we come in and say, well, we're going to chop all that down and we're going to put 4-foot sidewalks because some people might walk on it on game day, because we do not have the pedestrian traffic day to day. We just don't. So how are those taken into consideration in the planning tool?
Why
Very well said.
this big area over here was just set as an alternative as opposed to a part of it, because I know a lot of people drive in on Sang, just when they're going to work. But the idea was there's a lot of people won't walk up Cleveland. There's a lot different.
Cleveland is very different than Gray. Mm-hmm. So that's where, some of the, if it's a connecting street, yes, there are still some people that do walk that, and they would probably need a good balanced sidewalk and some lights, because there are some that do. Again, it's kind of asking the neighbors what kind of foot traffic actually occurs, rather than just assuming some does. And I'm going to assume that the city probably wouldn't come in and take those streets and sidewalk it, because we don't have, I think they would head count before they would, at least I hope they would, because that's a lot of money for sidewalks. They put it on Razorback, great idea. I've been over walking on that one. It's a lot of protection. But it's how to distinguish that planning tool, or how to fine tune it so that it doesn't carte blanche say any sidewalk that's put in and anywhere in that area has to be 4 feet wide. I think it needs to be fine tuned
Yes. And I
would
think
be
especially
my
with this
suggestion.
map is just giving, when we were discussing, every person on the committee thought of a different idea of what they considered to be the university area. Especially when you know where students live, it's like the whole university area could be Fayetteville, Springdale, you mean you can expand it really far. And so this was just to give it some parameters to work with. And I know especially from my opinion that the border areas will probably be a lot more discussed once those actual, as far as I know, there's been no suggestions or decisions that have been, or even considerations for these things right now. That's just to kind of give it some boundaries to work off of. And as those happen, there's going to be a lot of checks and balances. I know that like if our committee even suggests something, it has to go from a subcommittee to, we've created a lot of bureaucracy. If we think about that, we created it. It has to go from a subcommittee to the committee to city council before it's ever even approved. And that
So that's who would approve the final.
Like every decision or anything has to go through city council. And so.
And then even the map isn't binding. I mean, think about the Weddington corridor that we just did. We drew the corridor plan out, and then we started talking about, well, do we want to come across 540 a little bit? And we didn't really make that an official part of the map, but we considered that, and so we still are. So it's not a binding. That's kind of what I was trying to say, is we're just trying to draw some boundaries that we can work in and have our mind on something, but it's not a binding effort of the city to say, okay, this is all we're going to look at. It's an effort to get this town and gown committee talking about with the residents. So we're not surprised. So the university didn't say, hey, let's do this, and then we sort of, we want everybody talking about it as we move along.
And I think especially the non-binding aspect, I'm going to expose some of my cards here, but I really hope to pass this with the stipulation of we revisiting it later in the fall or very early spring, December, January time, mainly because down here at the very bottom, which is not Ward 4, but you've got all those new student developments that were supposed to open next month that are most likely not going to open next month, but are going to open in December. A lot of them will open in December. And in my opinion, that's going to change a lot of the flow. And what we used to consider of MLK 6th Street of a business, it could very rapidly become a pedestrian road. I think a lot of people think students have Porsches and because afford Harmony parking deck passes. But a lot of them I can see wanting to live in the Grove or the View and ride their bikes or walk to campus. So I think we as a committee will probably want to revisit this and discuss, and hopefully that potentially shifts the student population to more student-type housing. But specifically, if I can get your feedback on people that live, even if you don't live in University House, people that live in the University Heights area, what you think about this line. It's the green dark line that's currently being proposed. And as a Ward 4, what we consider this alternative big chunk, if that was something that you would want to be included, or you think that it's best that it's not included in this line right here, it's just considered.
I live at the near the western dead end of Maple Street, so I'm within the green line, and I don't think there's any way I could answer the question of whether I like it or not. If it benefits me, I love it. If it's a penalty, I hate it. And I know I'm an architect, and we do a lot of residential work in town. When we're doing projects in hillside overlay districts, it's demanding and burdensome to the homeowners. It costs more to do work in hillside areas. They have to pay us to provide a lot of extra documentation in the work to get building permits. And what I try to do as an encouragement to those clients is say, look, it may be difficult for you now, but you're going to love these ordinances when your neighbor next door is trying to do something stupid. And that's easy for me to say when they're paying for it. I'm going to be living in this, this boundary. There may be some new thing. I think that it demands a more articulate explanation of the consequences of being within that green line. Because right now, mean, I see the list of 10 things, I think, well, these are all, you know, a one-way street is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. A one-way street in the wrong place is a really bad thing. You know, traffic calming is terrific unless I'm the one that's in a hurry. And then it drives me insane. So, I mean, my feeling is that I think it's reasonable to define some district that is identified as part of the University of Arkansas Central Grounds. What the implications of that definition are is what I'm most interested in, and that's what I'd love to know more about.
I'll second that.
Well, Brett, I think that until we know what we have, we don't know the implications. But you can see on here, and it's going to be like in general zoning, look at your collector and arterial streets. They're going to be handled probably different than primary streets or proposed primary streets. And your small residential dead-end street like your street is going to be less impacted than the primary streets or something that could potentially be a primary street. And all that is yet to be defined. If you want to be defined as we move forward, see, a lot of the streets in your neighborhood are not even defined as any of these. So the impact is potentially less. But if you're looking at the impact, do we want to have the impact there on Sang and Cleveland? Is that important? Well, then that's what this is looking at primarily when you're looking at the 10 considerations. So if we can have a map that we know what we're looking at, then we can say, now what are the implications? Where is it that the bike lanes are? Should they be along your primary street or your planned primary street, or should they just be connecting with trails? And so we can look at that implication as we go forward, and everything will go through City Council. So this again is, we can either have this in our vision as we move forward, and you can see the same thing over in my area in Ward 2 at Wilson Park, because currently it doesn't really go to Park Street. It only goes to where the sororities are. That's it. Do we want the implications or do we not want them? And so it's a vision.
But back to what you said, when I first visited with Ryan, I think the first thing I said, you said something about lights, like all the lights would be the same, maybe the look
That's
and
true.
feel and the style. Well, what if we don't want lights on our street and we're inside the map? So kind of back to what Brett said and back to the length, the sidewalk widths on. So I was told there's nothing binding about this, but does it become that, okay, we're installing lights throughout this district and now all the lights will be the same whether you, I don't know.
It would be defined by code, so we would discuss it at City Council because it's defined by code. So we could say along your proposed primary streets, then this is what we would ask. And we would probably want like down lighting like we already have, and we would want it to be similar in the area. But that doesn't say that you have to, it would be up to City Council to define if we wanted it up and down our little streets that are kind of quiet and dark.
And we could choose the different types of lighting to determine if we make sure
So
we have lights with less light pollution.
it's like, do you want to be included in the discussion as we move forward, or should that be left as up to fate as it's defined in code outside the area?
As it
That's
is
something
now.
I just kind of skipped over the street thing because I thought everybody could read that. But I guess that's a definite way that you can see.
Well, I mean,
it's not going
unless
to be
you
a
were-
flat, like everybody has, 4-foot sidewalks. Everybody's going to have 4-foot sidewalks. That it might be, that certain types of roads get the 4-foot.
Because we've got to look at how to fund it, and I don't think that the city is ready to go with 4-foot sidewalks on every,
Some people don't want it all.
And so it's a long-term planning. So again, the 10 considerations is what they looked at, and then you can see the different definitions of the current traffic activity as they're defined in this map. So I think that that's real elemental whenever you're looking at this. And if you're in one of these smaller, and it's both sides of the street, You know, some people say, well, I live on the other side of the street, it won't bother me. So if it goes down your street, it's this street and the right of way on both sides of the street. So, and yeah, this will probably come to city council soon, so that's the implication. As you're moving forward and you're contacting your council members, it's going to be important to have that input.
Something that, if I can just point out something on the map real quick, Ryan, something that I've talked to a few people about is here we have Hartman Avenue.
Yeah.
If we draw the line here, because parking is going to be one of the considerations. If we draw the line here, will that just push the parking problem back to Hartman? And if we draw the line at Hartman, is it going to push it to the next street? Because there are three streets there, and so.
But there is a natural boundary there, Alan.
Right.
And that's my question. What is the logic of choosing that green line where it is and not going to the natural boundary?
And that's the question, I guess.
I'll be honest, I'm not in the subcommittee, so I didn't know what the discussion was.
Now, is this
question?
Question,
Oh, this isn't your.
is the green boundary for this subcommittee only, or is the green boundary for the whole Town and Gown committee?
It's for the whole Town and Gown to discuss
Okay.
different things.
It's a suggestion only.
Yeah, it's just a vision that's going to Town and Gown, and then from Town and Gown, however they define it, then it'll go to city council. Like was mentioned, we've added some bureaucracy here, but this is giving everyone the opportunity to have input as it impacts them directly.
Okay, well, that's my input. My input is why not follow the natural boundary, which is what people are doing.
Which one is?
Now, specifically, if you go west on Markham, which is my point of reference,
Okay.
right? Go west on Markham,
See,
and you go south and look at streets like Hartman, and behind them there is a natural boundary. You get up there into the hills, into the woods, right? And there's a tendency for people not to live in the woods. There's a tendency for them to live in the houses on the east side of the woods. And if we're going to talk about walking to class or walking to the university, they're going to be walking from there as well as from where I live at the corner of Thomas and Markham.
They already do, all
And
the
they
way
already
from
do.
up the hill.
So
just
that's
like
an
we-
issue that goes all the way up the hill, not just to where the green line is.
Okay,
So there
If
may
we're
be
talking
a
about
logical-
lighting to make it safe for people to walk at night, that issue goes that same way. Now, I don't think too many people walk from the bypass to the university. But I see them walking from up on the hill all the time, and I see them riding little motorcycles.
Do you know which street?
is it Center Street that you're
Pardon?
thinking of? Is it Center Street that has
Center is
that?
gonna
Center
go
Street
east
does,
to west.
if you go west on Center, Center will go as far west as you can in that immediate neighborhood.
Garvin.
Garvin's the one that crosses
Okay.
about 2 blocks worth.
Because I walk on Center.
And that
Okay.
goes north-south,
It's kinda scary.
across the top of the mountain. And then Heights comes down.
So,
Homeless people.
Mr. Mueller, I'm just trying to make sure I have, you'd like to see it move farther west.
I'm suggesting, I'm saying either move it farther west or tell me what the logic is that says keep it where it is.
Right.
That's what
I'm
saying.
agreeing with you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I knew
Yeah.
what
So
you
would
were.
you just take that same avenue line that's dotted there and just go south all the way to MLK?
Because you kind of cut through woods and things like that.
Well-
But you come out on Sang again.
I can't read the street names that are very,
But I
very
think
faint
if you take
here.
that dotted line, Ryan,
And-
point to that right there,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
just go down to MLK, I think is what you're saying.
Saying's underneath this, and then it comes back.
Because that could be developed in the future.
Yes.
I mean, and that would give us a planning tool to, you know,
Another
moving
Square.
forward.
Another primary
Yeah.
road could potentially be the same.
Yeah, I think,
We have to go with the dead
I
bodies.
think one of the criteria would be that it's within walking distance of class. You want your boundaries to include all reasonable walking distance of class.
Or at least a Razorback Road where you can catch the bus.
Well, and you're gonna have more students coming from MLK with all the
That's what.
construction, and you have Randy Junior High back in
Right
there.
there.
So sidewalks,
And on the north,
Battleship has a horrible, horrible infrastructure.
and on the northwest side, I know that people, even though it's not really designated as a collector, the Halsell curve, I know that people use that as just as a way to get to campus every day. So, you know, if traffic calming is one of the proposed measures, drawing that line out straight on and around Halsell would, you know, help give that extra traffic calming there too.
I remember years ago, we talked about the conflict between Cleveland and Weddington, that Weddington was supposed to be the primary street in that area, and Cleveland was supposed to be just secondary. And that's all, I mean, the fact of it is people are using Cleveland as a shortcut, and then the fact from that, you know, everybody's always looking for a shorter shortcut. And so saying to cross or saying to Halsell has become more common behavior.
Hots to Palmer.
Yeah.
Is too. Then you hit cross, and then you go outside.
On the subject of traffic calming, one of the things that tends to cause people to use Cleveland rather than come down Cross and on to Markham is Cleveland is wider.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Cross is narrow. And I say, for God's sake, let's keep it that way. And that terrible curve down there, that discourages through traffic. It's a natural form of traffic control. But that's not the issue here. The issue is the Town and Gown Committee.
What I
and
hear,
boundaries.
maybe just kind of like, it's not really a motion, we're not pushing, but what I hear is including the alternative and then expanding it, saying going straight to MLK.
Yeah, and that ties in with your observation that it might make sense to extend the boundary to the south to include some of that new student housing. If you're talking about student transportation back and forth to school affecting all of this planning, then the primary student housing areas should be included.
And I can see definitely that that's going to get interesting to see, because I feel like there has been a lot of infrastructure put into MLK 6th Street, but I feel like it's going to potentially have to be shifted once you have a couple thousand students living right across the street. But again, that will allow us to see that. I know there are some, again, apartments that are geared towards students, like behind, like you're referring to underneath our core campus boundary icon. There's some things out there as well. So do we have any, maybe just so I make sure I see any opposing views to like including this and then going straight down?
I'm not exactly going to express an opposing view, but just to kind of remind you that there are hundreds of people living in that area who are not students and who have maybe some connection, like belonging to the university community as teachers or other employees, whose interests are probably in conflict with those of these large congregations of bedrooms, as they're now called. And I just don't want you to forget about us.
But I actually have a related thought. Was there any, I didn't see it in the list of 24 topics, but was there discussion in the Town and Gown Committee about using this as an opportunity to identify the characteristic of a district and an attempt to preserve those characteristics?
I think there was discussion, but I don't think that we've got to that point. I mean, we've got to have some definition before we can, there's a lot going on here.
Not that you would get into the...
Because that's going to be, that you're going, again, you're looking at code, activity that goes to city council, as far as preservation. So,
not that you'd attempt at this level to define what the characteristic is, but just as a general objective, to say we want to try to preserve, if it's a single-family neighborhood, we like to kind of keep it
Well,
a single-family neighborhood.
I think that is a real big part of Town and Gown, though, is to protect our neighborhoods so that they're single-family neighborhoods. That was the driving force behind setting up the Town and Gown committee. So that's the driving force, at least from the town perspective, is to protect the nature of a single-family residential area.
The opposite, and this is just me being
obstinate.
No,
I'm
kidding. No, I know.
The other side.
Well, it's a fear that I would have is that you define this green line and say, well, this is the university district, and in the university district we have very high density housing on campus. Why not have very high density housing within the university district? It's perfectly consistent. And that's part of the argument that we heard with the Project Cleveland development that isn't happening, I guess. And I don't think anyone, my personal opinion is that people underestimated the magnitude of that project. That it was enormous, and that the amount of impact that it would have was generally underestimated. And so if this were a device that could help preserve the nature, the characteristic of an existing district, in my opinion, that would be a good thing. If it's something that is working in the opposite direction, then since I'm here representing my own agenda, of course, that would not be a good thing.
Yeah. At least my viewpoint on, and this you can take it from what I'm going as a committee member, is I think each college town is different. And one thing that defines Fayetteville and the University of Arkansas is that you have neighborhoods, like right next to the university. And they're not neighborhoods of college students, they're neighborhoods of families that are right next to the university. I know Wilson Park, at least when I was a student, I know current students. My sister was a Pi Phi, was your neighbor for a little while. And she liked going to Wilson Park and having that family feel. And so I think that's really critical to keeping the culture of the university, but also of Fayetteville. I know I had some friends that go to OU, and they have basically like Wilson Park all the way around their campus, but it's all university students living in these smaller houses. And that's not what at least my viewpoint, that's not what the culture of Fayetteville is. And I think we need to preserve that so we have that family meets university. So that's my own little 2 cents there.
And Brett, this is always going to be dynamic based on who you have on your city council. That is the bottom line here. Whenever someone is on city council representing you, you need to be sure that they're representing your interests. And if you have a person on city council that says, I'm an avid neighborhood preservationist, and they represent your view, that's who you need on city, because only city council can change the code. So that's the bottom line that we've got here. Now the university can do anything they want, and that's why we've got to have the communication. And you see what they've done on the south side of campus. You know, in our day when we were, those were single family homes down in Virginia in that area, and it was very cozy, and it's gone.
Not so much.
So I think that really the bottom line is, this is looking at these considerations for a general guideline, because the other committees are also looking at activity, which I kind of wanted to mention some things that are coming from my subcommittee. That this will be voted on as well as 3 proposals from the safety committee.
I want you to do that, but I want us to be mindful of our staff members' time. We're already 25 minutes over, so.
Well, I can be brief.
We can
because
do
ours
this
are not
again.
controversial. They're just informational.
I'll be here next time.
You want to go for it quickly?
Well, I can.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Whenever we talked about safety, we talked about trail safety, and one of the proposals we have is numbering in some type of universal system on campus and off campus the light poles up and down the trails, and putting it in our GIS system, so if there's an emergency, someone can, with a uniform GIS mapping situation, we can find where that person is with immediacy. So that was one. Another thing that we're looking at is working closer with the university and identifying future relationships for emergency response, because as we have more density and more growth at the University of Arkansas, then city resources are expected to be utilized for hazmat, for safety, for emergency response on every level, except for the police element. But you know, like if someone was injured and we had to have an ambulance come. And so we want to establish a clear statement of this relationship, because right now it's ambiguous. And this is not saying that the university should be giving the city more money or anything, but we need to realize that probably in station number 2, which protects the university, we're going to need a ladder truck, because there are taller buildings on campus at a higher density, but yet we don't have the capacity at station number 2. So maybe we can work with the university. Could we get an ambulance there at station number 2? Because they're having, I forgot the numbers, but it's the amount of emergency calls where they have to have the ambulance come in this central core has increased exponentially. But yet, do we have the response there? So, and then for hazmat, some of the, and the university has their own hazmat training and their own safety, and we work very well with them, so I'm not saying that, but we do want to be prepared by, if we could have a hazmat emergency response team at station number 2, we're looking at that, but someone has to pay for it. So that was the second thing, and the third thing was even more ambiguous, and I can't. Oh, it is coming up with a written statement between the 2 police divisions, because right now it's somewhat ambiguous.
And to give a plug or a positive, I know everybody really wants something to come out of this committee, in fact, sooner than later, but the numbering of the posts, that's something that I saw. Somebody threw out as an idea, and both, University started talking about it. The university already numbers their sign, numbers their light posts. The city doesn't, and they both were like, why don't we work together so that there's a unified numbering, very obvious. Residents, students all recognize it has a special sign. And so it's something that I think,
It's simple, but it's
a year ago nobody would have thought about, but because this committee came together, and again, it's a very simple, it might be an aesthetic fix, and it will be something that will hopefully be a safety fix really fast for not just students, but also for residents of Fayetteville.
And the development as far as subcommittee D, they have not come forward with any proposals, because we've got to have some definition. And so we don't have anything coming out of the subcommittee specifically for Group D at this point.
So what I'll take back, and I guess it's also recorded, so people can email me if they've got other feedback they want to provide. What I'm going to take back is, yes, to include the alternative, but also just to take the natural boundary of staying in that ridge all the way down to MLK to include this whole general area.
Everybody agree with that?
That sounds good.
I agree with that, and I also agree with your earlier suggestion of moving it south of MLK.
Well, I think y'all can see why City Council chose Brian to be our ward for rep. He's not only been a student, he's an employee of the university, but he owns a home in the neighborhood. And so we had people coming forward who wanted to be on the Town Gown Committee who really had agendas. And many of us do have things we really care a lot about, but it was good to see a balance in a candidate, and I think we did a really good job of putting you on the committee. Thank you for coming tonight and doing a great presentation.
I always worry to talk too much in the committee meetings, so if you watch the TV, you probably see me.
I think that people in Ward 4 appreciate you talking in the meetings.
We do. And thank you, Mark Kenyon, Ward 2, appreciate you very much for coming. Thank you, Dee Dee. Shout out to you for printing our maps for tonight and getting us the big updated one that included another piece there that mine didn't include. And most important of all, thank you to our citizens for being here. Thank you to our fire and police for all you do every day for us. Appreciate you very, very much.
And if anybody doesn't want these, you can pass them back, and I'll bring them next month as well as when we have our official committee meetings, so we can save a few trees.
Yeah.